Black people in America today are still residents, not citizens. And we confuse the words liberty with freedom. Liberty and freedom are not the same. White people have freedom. Black people have liberty. Freedom is the ability to make decisions without external control. Liberty is the ability to make decisions because an external control gave you the privilege. Do you see the difference? One of them, you got people doing what they want to do. The other, you can do what you want to do within these constraints because we still own you. That's exactly why Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves. Emancipation simply means to let go from bondage. It also means a transference of ownership from the individual to the state. They never eliminated slavery. They just transformed it.
Now, people would say that Barack Obama did Obamacare, which helped a lot of African Americans get health care. They would say that he did that for African Americans. They would also say that he opened up the White House to a younger
That's your
audience.
shirt, by the way,
Thank you,
my
brother.
college
Appreciate
tour.
it. Thank you, appreciate it. They said that, that there are stuff that he does for the African American community. They say his hands are tied behind his back. There's no support in Congress. They said he's opened up the White House to musicians, artists, to kids that normally wouldn't get a chance to see the White House, wouldn't get a chance to be in the White House, wouldn't get a chance to learn in the White House. They said he's done a lot for youth. You know? Do you agree? Or
I totally disagree. What has Obama to change the intentional exploitation of black children in special education? What has Obama done to increase the rate of African American teachers and principals? What has Obama done to modernize the schools in predominantly African American school districts?
What freedom do Americans think they have that they actually don't?
Freedom to privacy. There is no privacy in this country because of FISA. They're monitoring your calls, your text messages. They can get into your social media chats. Unless it is bulletproof encrypted, they can get to it, and you are being spied on by your government. And that's such a violation of the First Amendment in that you can be targeted for things that you say or places that you go, and now they're invading your privacy simply because of the opinion you have.
Good morning, I'm not MAGA, please don't scroll. I've got a moral compass and a soul, and I believe in freedom. Some of y'all see a white guy stand in front of a flag and you're confused by my intro. Well, let me spell it out for you. I support women's rights because I believe in freedom. I support the LGBTQIA because I believe in freedom. I support theists and atheists alike because I believe in freedom. I support Muslims and Christians, Hindu, Buddhists, people of Jewish faith because I believe in freedom. I support spiritualists and naturalists because I believe in freedom. And as stated previously, I support atheists because I believe in freedom. I support the black community, the Hispanic, Latino, and Latina community, the Middle Eastern and Asian community, the indigenous native community, the islander community, because I believe in freedom. I support a woman's right to choose over her own body because I believe in freedom. And I call myself an actual Christian because I believe in freedom. Because those that persecute any of the aforementioned communities believe in oppression. You can't persecute immigrants and say the Bible talks about following the laws of man and turn a blind eye to everyone involved in the e-files. Turn a blind eye to outright corruption and immorality. Turn a blind eye to unconstitutional illegalities. Turn a blind eye to love thy neighbor. You can't support oppression and call yourself a freedom-loving American. I support freedom, and anyone that argues against anything I just said doesn't actually support freedom. I am Antifa, and I'm a freedom lover.
And since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American. Other countries may seek to compete with us, but in one vital area, as a beacon of freedom and opportunity that draws the people of the world, no country on earth comes close. This, I believe, is one of the most important sources of America's greatness. We lead the world because, unique among nations, we draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world. And by doing so, we continuously renew and enrich our nation. Thanks to each wave of new arrivals to this land of opportunity, we're a nation forever young, forever bursting with energy and new ideas, and always on the cutting edge, always leading the world to the next frontier. This quality is vital to our future as a nation. If we ever closed the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost.
Do you know the Statue of Liberty you see today was originally designed as a black woman holding broken chains? But when America saw the design, they rejected it. They never taught you the version America tried to bury. The statue didn't start as a symbol of immigration. It started as a tribute to the end of slavery. Her creator, Frederick Bartholdi, wanted the statue to honor the end of slavery and black freedom, not immigration. Bartholdi's first drawing showed liberty with African features, strong jawline, fuller lips, and broken chains held high in her hand. She was meant to shine for the newly freed. She wasn't welcoming the world. She was celebrating the fall of slavery. But America didn't want a monument reminding them of slavery, especially not one shaped like a black woman. So they told him to change it. Make her whiter, make her more European. They asked him to change her face, change her bodies, and hide the chains. The broken chains were removed from her hand and quietly moved to her feet. The chains are still there, at her feet, out of sight, but never removed. Most visitors never notice them, unless they already know the truth. When Liberty's torch and head were displayed in Philadelphia in 1876, newspapers praised liberty, but never mentioned slavery. They rewrote her meaning before she was even built. When the statue rose in 1886, the black woman was gone, the chains were hidden, and America introduced her as a symbol of immigration instead. And the people she was meant to honor were written out of her story. If the Statue of Liberty began as a monument to black freedom, why is that story missing from textbooks? Why did America erase the black woman inside the statue, but keep the chains hidden at her feet? And what other truths are we still walking past every day? More than 10 million voices were silenced.
We've made it 1 year penalty for inciting riots. We took the freedom of speech away because that's been through the courts, and the court said you have freedom of speech. But what has happened is when they burn a flag, it agitates and irritates crowds. They've never seen anything like it on both sides, and you end up with riots. So we're going on that basis. We're looking at it not from the freedom of speech, which I always felt strongly about, but never passed the courts. This is what they do, is they incite. When you burn an American flag, you incite tremendous violence. We have many examples of it, many examples of it, and it's actually down on tape, and you see things happen that just don't happen unless it's the flag that's burning.
Oh, but that's why we're in America. We're free in America. You're not free in America. You're as free as a free-range chicken. You do not have freedom. It's illegal to go off-grid in many states. It's illegal to collect rainwater in many states. It's illegal to feed homeless people in many states. It's illegal to shoot a deer and give meat to your neighbor in many states. It's illegal to post certain things or talk about certain things. Don't tell me you're free. You're not free.
Freedom versus liberty. What's the difference and why does Americans care? Welcome back to the Freedom Room, where we go beyond the headlines and explore the history behind Americans' biggest questions about freedom, about power, and democracy. Here's a question that sounds simple but becomes surprisingly complicated the moment you think about it. What is the difference between freedom and liberty? Most Americans use these two words as if they mean exactly the same thing, and in ordinary conversations, they often do. But when we look at American founding documents and the political philosophy surrounding them, the words open up a much bigger conversation about government, rights, and individuals. The Declaration of Independence firmly placed liberty alongside life and the pursuit of happiness amongst the rights Americans claim as fundamental. The Constitution later spoke of securing the blessings of liberty. But here is where things become fascinating. Is freedom simply the ability to do whatever you want? Or does real liberty mean being protected from arbitrary power while living within a society governed by laws? Scholars have described different concepts of liberty, including the idea of being free from unnecessary interference and the idea of being free to pursue meaningful goals. So today we are going back to Americans' foundings to ask a question that may change the way you hear the word freedom forever. Are freedom and liberty actually the same thing?
Most people think of liberty and freedom as synonyms. In the US, we think of freedom as the ability to do what you want, but when you look at the way that word is actually used, people actually mean freedom from repercussion. Like when people talk about their right to free speech, what they're actually looking from is freedom from social repercussion. And that's why we always have to remind people that freedom of speech means that the government cannot retaliate against you. It doesn't mean that you are free from any sort of social retaliation. Liberty is not the freedom to do what you want. Liberty is freedom from constraints that hold you back. This is why we're seeing the protest in France play out so differently, because France is trying to raise the retirement age, and French people view that as an attack on their freedom from work. In the United States, we are pushing through right to work laws. What we want is the freedom to be able to go out and earn as much money as possible. That's how we conceptualize it, instead of having the freedom from the burden of needing to work to survive. French people are not protesting for freedom. They are protesting for liberty, to be able to live their lives freely. And I want to take this back to the conversations about privilege and moving away from this idea that privilege is the end goal. It is the things that you have gotten. And what we need to do is realize that privilege is about your access to resources and an ignorance of how difficult it is to live without those accesses to those resources. So like white privilege is access to resources like food, clothing, and shelter. Like we can look at shelter specifically and see how redlining was designed to give white people better access to housing as a resource. Knowing that you will have access to the things that you need to survive gives you the freedom to move about the world and pursue bigger things than just survival. And that's what liberty really is. So when white people have lived their whole lives with liberty, they take that for granted and don't even realize that it is something that they experience. Instead, they start looking for the next thing, which is freedom. Freedom to do whatever you want because your basic needs are already met. And having that freedom to do whatever you want in practice actually just looks like freedom from repercussions, freedom from bad things happening to you because other people don't like you doing what you wanted.
Harriet Tubman left people behind. She had to. Not everybody wanted freedom. Some people were so married to the plantation they'd fight you before they fought their master. And when I see all these Voldemort sympathizers crying and clutching their pearls, that's the same energy. Y'all ain't freedom fighters. Y'all are the Overseer's fan club. Harriet didn't waste time dragging the unwilling. She knew that if you hesitate, you were going to put the whole mission at risk. You're going to slow down everybody that's trying to get free. And that's exactly what I am watching today. People pretending that Voldemort was just political views. But that can't be accurate because political views are about taxes, about policy, about what size the government should be. But what he pushed was hate. I'm not going to do the whole recap. We all know who he was. But I say all that to say that's not politics. And now we got people out here sobbing for him, defending him, writing think pieces like he was some misunderstood uncle. Please, he showed you who he was every single chance he got. And if you're still crying, it's because you agreed with the hate. You weren't blinded, you were just comfortable with the plantation. And here's what makes it worse, because your tears don't just make you look pathetic. They feed the system. They keep authoritarianism breathing. Every time you say he was just sharing his beliefs, what you're really saying is, I don't care who gets hurt, as long as I can stay close to power. I observe more than I speak, usually. And what I'm seeing right now? A lineup of Z-list actors auditioning for parts that no one asked them to play, crying for a man that wouldn't have spit on them if they were on fire. You think that's loyalty? You think that's being a good Christian? All that is self-inflicted chains. That's begging to sit at the overseer's table and be grateful for scraps. So no, I am not mourning Voldemort. I'm not shedding a tear for a man who built his entire brand on tearing us down. What I am doing is thanking his little fan club, because every time y'all expose yourselves, every time you choose the cage, you clear space on the railroad for somebody who actually wants to be free. Harriet understood it, and so do I. Freedom ain't for everybody. Some of y'all would rather die clutching your master's hand than to live free. And that, yeah, that's on you.
He said, I'd like you to come to the Statue of Liberty. I said, no. And he said, no, why not? I said, I'm not going, Floyd. It's going to make me mad. I'm not going. He says, well, Why is it going to make you mad? I said, because, well, I've been to France. I'd actually seen the original drawings of Bartholdi, who was the architect who did the sculpture. And I knew that the Statue of Liberty, and everybody knows in her right hand she's holding a torch. And I always ask my audience, what is she holding in her left hand? Right. And when I was at the Statue of Liberty, because I eventually agreed, because Floyd was insistent, and he said, I can give you a pass. We can go up in her eye and everything. I said, okay. So when I go there, I'm going there with the knowledge that the Statue of Liberty was holding originally in her left hand broken chains. Again, commissioned 1865, pretty important date, end of slavery, end of the Civil War. All of those things were why. She is a statue of what? Liberty. Which makes sense. So she has broken chains in her left hand. Now she's holding a rectangular object with a Roman numeral on it. That's what she's holding. So I'm telling Floyd, I said, I know for a fact this is a historical document. I know it is. So first thing that happens when you go to Statue of Liberty, and I actually went to the first time with a friend of mine, and her name is Faith Holmes. And Faith is white, very white, blonde hair, blue eyes. She almost got us thrown out of the place. She had a meltdown, right? I'm going, look, you can't be melting down here. Okay, we're not having it, news at 11. So we're there, and I'm really, really very, very, the ranger who was, you get taken together and you get put in these groups. You're assigned a ranger. And he was very enthusiastic. He really was. He's a really enthusiastic man. He says, so now, I am going to be your ranger today. And they tell you more about the Statue of Liberty than you ever want to know. They tell you why it's green, because it was copper and it oxidized. They tell you how they got it over there. They tell you how they changed the torch a couple of times. They tell you that they even show you how thin it is, right? Just how thin the whole thing is, right? And he says, and if you have any questions, so of course,
excuse me,
my head shot up, right? And I said, I was wondering if you're going to talk about the chains, right? So now you got to understand, every 20 minutes, thousands of people are getting off that ferry, coming to Ellis Island, coming to Statue of Liberty. So I say something about chains, and now you got people translating it into different languages. They go, she said something about chains, right? So, because I knew that she was holding, those broken chains. So now at this point, I'm like, they got to be here somewhere. So Floyd and I are now looking for the historical document that I said, the picture of it. I said, they can't not have it. It's a Statue of Liberty. They got to have it there. So we go into the basement of the Statue of Liberty.
This was so crazy to me.
We're in the basement of the Statue of Liberty. We find the document encased in glass behind figurines facing a wall in a hallway. So here we have the truth hidden in plain sight. So I'm sitting there going, so Floyd, I take a picture of it. The picture is in the book, right? So I took a picture and I said, this is insane. I said, this is really insane that, here we have that picture. Well, I then asked my audience, who won the argument? Because Bartholdi insisted that the chains remain. He really did. He was adamant. He was an advocate for abolitionism. He said the chains got to stay. And I asked the audience, who won? Did Bartholdi win or did the United States win? And they always say, well, the United States won. I said, no, they didn't. Bartholdi won. The chains are actually still there. And they have always been there the entire time at her feet, where it is impossible to see them under any circumstances. Those broken shackles are on both sides. On her, as she's looks like she's walking, there are broken shackles at her feet. So the agreement was, we'll keep the chains, but we'll make it so no one can see them. Because if she's on a pedestal, the Statue of Liberty, if no one who's ever been, sometimes they don't realize, because we always see her like she's standing flat on the ground, but she's on a huge pedestal. Right. So you can't see over to see the chains. And if you're inside, you can't see them. So they're there and they're hidden. So now I'm feeling some kind of way, right? But I'm thinking, Floyd just got the job. You know what I'm saying? The man.
I can't let him lose his good black job.
The man, I can't get the man. So I took Floyd, and Floyd, being Floyd, he said, go on and bring it, Joy. Go on and bring it. So I spoke to his supervisor. I said, I would like to pay to have a picture of the chains at her feet so that they're on display. And they're explained. And he said, no. I said, tell you what I can do. I said, I'm sure that I can get, just cross the water, a black sculptor that will just sculpt that part. Because God knows they show you every aspect of the Statue of Liberty. And he says, yeah, no. I said, okay, I'm going to tell on you. And so I travel all over the world.
Yeah.
For a living, I travel all over the world. And I told this story. And I showed the pictures all over the world. So I get this call from the Department of the Interior. They said, we'd like to talk to you, Dr. DeGruy. And I'm going, I'm not scared. I'm from South Central. I did tell my family where I was going. So they call me and I come over and his boss, I think it was his boss's boss, who said to me, Dr. DeGruy, we want to, one, apologize and we want to acknowledge that we've been negligent and we want to correct this. We want to immediately correct this. And the first thing we want to do is, we want to hire you to train all our rangers. I said, okay. And we're going to correct this negligence we've shown. So I didn't believe him. So I went back undercover, right? Because I wanted to know a couple of things. I wanted to know if they were going to first talk about the chains unasked, because I had asked about the chains. And I was assigned with my little group. This is 2013, 2014. I'll go back. And I want to know if they've actually changed that. And my third visit, I go back and I have a great ranger. The ranger not only tells the story of the chains, turns to me and says, this is American history I'm sharing. It is your history and it is my history. And I am proud to tell the story. It's a white ranger, right? So I'm thinking, great, this is wonderful. And the next thing I know, well, on the second visit, I had seen the picture displayed and all that was great. But then in 2019, May 23rd, the Washington Post, they now have a museum that wasn't there. And they have a huge museum now at the Statue of Liberty. And it says the Statue of Liberty was designed to celebrate freed slaves, not immigrants. Mm-hmm. Its new museum now recounts. And it goes on to explain that the immigration came later.
Right.
Years later it came. It was literally commissioned to celebrate the end of slavery. But when black people walk through, you hear white people say, oh, well, my great-great and my great-great. But black men, women, and children feel no connection to Lady Liberty.
Come on.
But how much prouder would they be if they knew that their ancestors that didn't come through Ellis Island, that came chained together in the belly of ships, that she was standing on those shackles? How much prouder would those young people be? How much honor would they display in understanding who paid for them?
Yeah.
You erase the chains, you erase me. So why don't we show the chains? And that was the whole point, because you see, once you show the chains, you've got to explain them.
You got to explain
And
them.
do you understand? Every black man, woman, and child can literally say, oh, no, that's mine.
That's mine.
That's mine. And all of this time, America lied to its people and to the world. The most recognized symbol probably on the planet. And we've never told the truth.
To understand why this distinction matters, let's go back to the American Revolution. In 1776, the American colonies were challenging the authorities of the British Crown. The Declaration of Independence wasn't simply a document announcing that 13 colonies wanted to become a new country. It presented an argument about the relationship between human beings and government. The declaration declared that people possess certain unavailable rights and identify life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness amongst them. It's also argued that the government drives the legitimate power on the consent of the governed. In other words, the basic idea was that government was not supposed to be the source of people's fundamental rights. Government existed to secure them. That distinction is important because it gets us closer to what Americans have historically meant by liberty. Imagine, for example, that you are free to say whatever you want, but the government can punish you whenever it dislikes your opinion. Are you truly living with the political liberty? Or imagine that a government tells you that you are allowed to participate in society only if you agree with whosoever is in power. You may technically have freedom to act, but your freedom is vulnerable to arbitrary authority. This is why liberty has often been connected to limits on government power and protection under law. Freedom, meanwhile, is often used more broadly to describe the ability to act, to think, and to live without restraint. The distinction isn't absolute. In everyday American language, the word overlaps enormously. There is no single universally accepted rule saying freedom means this, while liberty means that. In fact, Americans have historically used the two terms interchangeably in many contexts, but there are useful philosophical distinctions. One way of thinking about freedom is freedom from censorship, oppression, arbitrary government actions, or unnecessary restrictions. To understand why this distinction matters, let's go back to the American Revolution. In 1776, the American colonies were challenging the authorities of the British Crown. The Declaration of Independence wasn't simply a document announcing that 13 colonies wanted to become a new country. It presented an argument about the relationship between human beings and government. The Declaration declared that people possess certain unavailable rights and identify life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness amongst them. It also argued that government drives the legitimate power on the consent of the governed. In other words, the basic idea was that government was not supposed to be the source of people's fundamental rights. Government existed to secure them. That distinction is important because it gets us closer to what Americans have historically meant by liberty. Imagine, for example, that you are free to say whatever you want, but the government can punish you whenever it dislikes your opinion. Are you truly living with the political liberty? Or imagine that a government tells you that you are allowed to participate in society only if you agree with whosoever is in power. You may technically have freedom to act, but your freedom is vulnerable to arbitrary authority. This is why liberty has often been connected to limits on government power and protection under law. Freedom, meanwhile, is often used more broadly to describe the ability to act, to think, and to live without restraint. The distinction isn't absolute. In everyday American language, the word overlaps enormously. There is no single universally accepted rule saying freedom means this, while liberty means that. In fact, Americans have historically used the two terms interchangeably in many contexts, but there are useful philosophical distinctions. One way of thinking about freedom is freedom from censorship, oppression, arbitrary government actions, or unnecessary restrictions. Another is freedom to having the genuine ability to pursue your goals and participate in society. And this creates a fascinating political argument. Suppose the government passes a law restricting something you want to do. One person might say, the law has taken away my freedom. Another might respond, the law is protecting the liberty of everyone else. Suddenly, the debate isn't about whether freedom is good. Almost everyone agrees that freedom is vulnerable. The real question becomes, where should freedom stop? Consider freedom of speech. Americans have a constitutional protection against certain forms of government interference with speech. But that doesn't mean every action involving speech is legally protected in every circumstance. The broader principle is that liberty exists within a constitutional system of rights, responsibilities, and laws. This is the one reason that the Constitution and Bill of Rights became so important after independence. The Declaration explained why the Americans believed that they had the right to break into British rules. The Constitution then created a government while the Bill of Rights placed important limits on that government's power. The National Constitution Center described the document as having different purposes. The Declaration justified separation from a government, while the Constitution and the Bill of Rights established and constrained a new government. And there is another uncomfortable part of the story. When Americans declared that liberty was a fundamental idea, that promise was not immediately enjoyed equally by everyone. Millions of enslaved people remained in bondage. Women lacked many political rights. Native people faced dispossessions and violence. Other groups were excluded from full participation in American political life. This created one of the central contradictions in American history. A nation proclaimed liberty while denying liberty to large parts of the population. That contradiction didn't disappear overnight. Generations of Americans challenged it. Abolitionists invoked Americans' founding principles against slavery. The women's suffrage movement demanded political equality. Civil rights activists challenged segregation and discrimination. And leaders such as Frederick Douglass repeatedly confronted the country with the gaps between American stated ideas and its treatment of its citizens. Later, Abraham Lincoln described the civil rights war as a struggle that ultimately required a new birth of freedom, connecting the country's future to the unfinished promise of liberty. So, when Americans argue about freedom today, whether they are debating speech, religion, immigration, voting, government power, or individual rights, they are participating in a debate that is far older than today's political parties. The vocabulary may change, but the fundamental question remains remarkably similar. How much power should government have over individuals, and what rights should individuals be able to claim against governments?
I would advise you to do some research on what you're celebrating on July 4th. As much as you might like to stand around your kiddie pool with your 12 stepkids drinking Budweiser and smoking cigs, talking about how America's number one, the whole point of July 4th is to remember that we intentionally chose to never live under authoritarian rule again, to have freedom, to have actual independence. We will never live under a king again. The spirit of the American person is one of rebelliousness, is one of fighting, one of standing up for others, specifically standing up for those with less rights than themselves. So if you are someone with tons of rights and freedoms and liberties, it is your duty to stand up for those who are disadvantaged, disenfranchised, or don't have the same rights. So no, we're not celebrating our military killing people and standing up. We're celebrating our independence and our intentional decision to never live under a king again. Remember that.
America is the most free country in the world. Freedom! If we're so free, then how come according to the Human Freedom Index, there are 16 whole countries that are more free than the US? Assuming that about 50% of the population is male, 73% of the population is white, 65% of the population is Christian, and about 97% of the population is straight, then that means that about 23% of the population is a straight white Christian male. And yes, that was very rough math, okay? The idea is still there. Stay with me, stay with me. So unless you fall into that 23%, in this country you are facing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. So how are we free? And what is it that makes you guys say,
do you know the difference between freedom and liberty? Hi, it's Andy Tucker here. AJT Guns and Gunsmithing. And those two words are used oftentimes synonymous, interchangeably, but they're really not. Freedom involves the lack of constraint from doing things. It involves the power or the ability to be able to do something without interference. But liberty is actually the exercise of that freedom. Everybody watching this that's in the United States has the freedom of free speech, can say what they want, but you only have that liberty if you exercise it. It's about time we stand up and say what's right and what's wrong. Everybody who's watching this in the United States that hasn't been convicted of a felony has the freedom to carry a weapon. But we've allowed legislatures and governments to restrict that freedom to where we don't have those liberties as much anymore. We ought to stand up for change. We ought to do right. Say the uncomfortable thing. Have a good day. Enjoy your 4th of July.
So, are freedom and liberty the same thing? Sometimes they are used that way, but there's a useful distinction. Freedom can describe the ability to act, think, or live without restraint. Liberty can describe that freedom as it exists within a society, protected by rights, laws, and limits on arbitrary power. Neither definition is perfect, and reasonably, People can disagree about exactly where the line should be, but understanding the distinction helps explain something important about American history. The United States wasn't founded simply around the idea that everyone should be able to do whatever they want. The founding argument was more complicated. The Declaration claimed that people possess fundamental rights and that legitimate government depended on the consent of the governed. The Constitution then created a government powerful enough to function but divided and limited enough to protect liberty. And American history shows that the meaning of liberty has never been completely settled. The country proclaimed liberty in 1776, fought a civil war over slavery, amended the Constitution, expanded voting rights, fought a massive civil rights struggle, and continued to debate the boundaries between individual freedom and government authorities. That is why this isn't merely a vocabulary lesson. It is a story about America itself. When someone says, I want my freedom, the next question should be, freedom from what? Freedom to do what? And who has the power to decide? Those questions sit at the heart of American politics. Thank you for watching. Please comment, share your opinion, and see you in the next video.